How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode here on Let's Build Twitter. As always, I'm Ethan, or Unknown Coder, your favorite underqualified senior software engineer. And as always, if you guys do want access to the private repository for this project, what you need to go ahead and do is subscribe to the repository to your membership here on the channel. That'll go ahead and unlock you a form to request access to this specific repository and any other private repositories I may have at that time. With that being said, y'all, let's go and hop into what we're working on today. Today, we're going to go ahead and start working on this button up here to be able to open up a modal and allow us to rename the conversation. So that being said, y'all, let's go and hop into the Java code first, update the backend, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do that on the front end. So let's hop into the code and get to work. Here in the backend, we need to go ahead and once again hop into the conversation service. Let's go in there. Inside our conversation service, we need to go ahead and add a new method to actually rename a conversation. Go and say public conversation, and then we're going to just go ahead and call this update conversation name, and this is going to go ahead and take in an integer with a conversation ID and a string with a conversation name. Let's go ahead and say conversation, if I could type conversation equal to this dot find by ID. We'll go ahead and pass in that conversation ID. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is say conversation dot, and then we'll say set conversation name. Here we're going to go ahead and say conversation name dot equals an empty brace or empty. We'll go ahead and say question mark and then null. So we'll go ahead and reset to nothing. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and say conversation name. So on the front end, we do have some logic to check to see if it's null or undefined, whatever. So that's fine. We're going to go ahead and say return conversation repository dot save and then pass in that conversation. So that's all we need to do on this side. Now we need to go ahead and make a new request DTO to handle this. So let's go and say space JC, go ahead and make a DTO. And then here it's going to be update conversation name request. Let's go ahead and create this class. This is also going to be very simple. We're just going to go ahead and have a private, if I could type, integer, and then this is going to be conversation ID. Okay, I think I spelled it right. Private, and then string conversation name. Let's go ahead and set up our constructors. So we'll do a no args. We'll go ahead and do an all args. We'll go ahead and do getters and setters. We'll go ahead and create a toString, and then we'll go ahead and use a hash code equals as well, just for the heck of it. Go ahead and clean that up a little bit and save. Now the last thing we need to go ahead and do is, of course, set up that conversation controller. Let's go and hop into the conversation controller. Inside our conversation controller, let's go ahead and scroll down to below muted. Let's go ahead and say at put mapping like so, and this is going to go and called rename. Let's go ahead and say public conversation, and we're going to go ahead and just call this update conversation name, because technically you could set to nothing, so we're not going to go ahead and call it rename. At request body, it's going to go ahead and be an update conversation name request, call that body like so, and here we're going to go ahead and return conversation service, and then we're going to go ahead and call this update conversation name be body.get conversation ID, and we'll also go ahead and say body.get conversation name, pass that back, and save everything. Looks good. Let's go ahead and just make sure the application restarts and saves and everything. Go ahead and restart the application. I'll be back with you in the front end. Java has restarted successfully, so let's open up the front end code. The first thing we need to go ahead and do is we need to make some updates to our bottomless modal. That way we can go ahead and open up the rename modal and actually rename the conversation. Let's go ahead and open up that bottomless modal component. Inside bottomless modal, we have these props that have top bar and content. We need to add some more props. So we're going to go ahead and add an optional width, which is a string. We're going to go ahead and add an optional height, which is a string, and then we're going to go ahead and have an optional disable scroll, which is a boolean, and then we're going to go ahead and have an optional click outside. So click outside, which is going to be a function that takes in a react.mouse event, and then this is going to go ahead and be a void. Alright, so there we go. Let's go ahead and also bring these in. So we're going to have our content. We're going to go ahead and have our width, have our height. We're going to have our disable scroll, and then our click outside. Alright, so now we need to go ahead and make some changes here. Here we're going to go ahead and say const click outside ref, is equal to useRef. Go and bring in useRef, be an HTML div element, and then or null, like so. And then let's go ahead and pass in null. So we want to be able to click outside to close out this modal. That wasn't something we had before, so we're going to add that. And then we're going to go to about line 24, so below here, or actually here. And it looks like we've already added this position XP. So I'm not sure why that set has changed. It might have just been like space or something. So we're going to ignore that. Then we're going to come to about line 28. So we're going to come here, more or less. We're going to say const handle, whoops, click outside. This is going to equal to an e react.mouse event. And then go ahead and do this. So here, if we have a click outside, then we're going to go ahead and call that click outside. And the reason that we're doing this is because this might not be defined. So we want to make sure it's defined. And then we're going to come below here and say use click outside. And then this is going to be the click outside ref. And then we're going to go ahead and pass in that handle click outside. So I don't want to pass in a undefined function to this use click outside. So that's why we're doing this. Oh, let's pass in E. There we go. So now we get to the fun stuff. So now we need to come down to about line 43, which is the one with BG color. So now we're going to go ahead and add a style to this. So style. So we're going to add height and width. We're also going to go ahead and say ref is equal to our click outside ref. And then if this height and width is disabled or undefined, it just won't do anything. And then we're also going to go ahead and come to the scroll box. We're going to add a style equal to, and then this is going to say disable scroll question mark. If that's the case, we can go ahead and say overflow and y. Y is going to go ahead and be hidden. Hidden. Otherwise, we're just going to pass nothing type situation. And I believe that's basically all the updates that we want here, because the reasoning that we're doing this is because the rename modal is actually pretty small. So we want to set a specific height and width and override the height and width that we have set here. We also don't want to scroll. So we can go ahead and disable that. In theory, that should be everything in here. Hopefully I didn't typo anything. It gets a little bit finicky when you need to go to specific lines and make specific refactors, but we're going to have our fingers crossed here. Now what we need to go ahead and do is actually create the rename conversation modal. Let's open up our Explorer here. We can close out of our components for now. Go into our messaging feature in our components. Let's go ahead and say message rename conversation modal / message rename conversation modal.tsx, and then we're gonna have a message rename conversation modal.css and hop in here. So this component is going to get a little bit dicey, but it is what it is. Let's go ahead and import our React from React. Let's also go ahead and import our // and this is going to be message rename conversation modal.css. Let's export const on our message rename conversation modal, say react.fc. I don't believe this takes in any props, so it's going to go ahead and do one of these. And then inside, we're going to go ahead and return. And this is just going to go ahead and return a BottomlessModal. And then inside our BottomlessModal, we're going to say that the height is equal to 300 px. We're going to go ahead and say that the width is equal to, and this is going to be 420 px, blaze it. We're going to have a top bar component, which is going to go ahead and be our message rename modal, and then conversation modal. Oops, I added an extra modal, message rename conversation modal, and then top bar. Go ahead and close out of that. And then our content is going to equal to our message rename conversation modal, and then content or body, I think we call it. Doesn't really matter what we call the placeholder, but it is what it is, and do that. All right, so there is the kind of skeleton BottomlessModal. Now we need a way to actually open this up, and to do that we need to go ahead and update the modal slice. So let's go ahead and update the modal slice to be able to open this bad boy up. So once again, the modal slice, it doesn't necessarily matter where this goes. I'm just going to go ahead and put it here. So we need to add a display and then rename conversation, which is a boolean. And we need to come down below here and set this to false. So let's go ahead and say display and then rename conversation equal to false. And then as always, we need to go ahead and add in the dispatcher. So let's go ahead and call in, or the reducer, I'm sorry. We're going to say update display rename conversation. It's going to take in our state. We're going to return our state. We're going to go ahead and say display rename conversation is not state dot rename or display rename conversation, and then we just need to go and export this. So go and export update display rename conversation. Now we need to go ahead and actually display this inside of our modal container, as you guys have seen before. So let's go ahead and hop into that modal container. Now inside of our modal container, it doesn't really matter where this goes. I'm just going to put it here, const display, and then rename conversation equal to use selector, and then we're going to go ahead and have our state packet type, state root state, and then we're going to go ahead and have our state dot modal dot display and type rename conversation. And now we can go ahead and just scroll down here, and I'm just going to set it below the list modal, so display and rename conversation, and then we're going to go ahead and have our message, and I think we call this message rename conversation modal, like so. Cool. So now we can open it, but now obviously we need to be able to open it from our info pane. Let's go and hop into that message conversation info pane to actually be able to open it. Then we can start working on the logic to actually rename it and do all of the code inside of the modal. So let's hop into that info pane. Inside our info pane, we need to go ahead and go to this handle open rename conversation function, which is conveniently right where we spawned in at. We're going to go ahead and dispatch. And then we're going to go ahead and dispatch the update display rename conversation, like so. And now this should already be being used. And we scroll down here, let's see, handle rename open rename conversation. Let's go ahead and hop into Twitter and just see how this is looking, and then we'll go ahead and hop back in here and start working on the logic to actually make the request to rename it, and then also the code inside of the modal itself to make it look nice. And it looks like I might have, let's see here, cannot resolve message rename conversation modal. Let's go and see how I spelled that wrong. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So message conversation, rename this, make sure we have a conversation. There we go, much better. And we restart the application server. Let's go ahead and create a new, we're just going to say Rick, like so. We'll also go ahead and put Morty in there. Next, go and click on this, and now if we click on rename, pops up this little modal, and then we need to obviously work inside here. I guess I didn't add the click outside. I thought that this is supposed to have a click outside. Let me double check the code here. I either just straight up missed the click outside or something else, or maybe we added in later, but I digress. Let's go ahead and continue working here. We can just refresh for now, and then we'll get back to that if we need to. But let's hop back into the code and start setting up the ability to actually rename the conversation inside the modal, or inside the message slice, I mean. Inside the message slice, let's go back up from where we were in the last episode. The first thing we need to do is add a new interface in for the payload. So we're going to go ahead and say interface, and this is going to be update conversation name payload. And then in here, we're going to go and have a conversation packet type ID again, which is a number. We're going to go and have a conversation name, which is a string, and we're going to go and have our token, which is a string, like so. Now let's go ahead and scroll down here. We want to come below our mute conversation. We're going to say export const, and this is going to be rename conversation is equal to create async thunk. And then in here, we're going to open this up. It's going to be message/rename, and then we're going to say async, like so. And this will be payload, and this will be update conversation name payload, and we'll have our thunk API packet type. That'd be cool. Let's do our arrow function. So here we'll set a try and a catch. We'll go ahead and catch E maybe, and then we'll return thunk API. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry y'all, can't type. Dot return or reject with value and pass in that E. Okay, and then inside the try we're going to say let body equal to an object, and we'll have our conversation ID. It's going to be payload.conversation ID. We're going to have our conversation name, packet type, conversation name, which is going to be payload.conversation name. And then let's go ahead and say let res equal to await axios.put, and this is going to be 2/ or http : and then this is going to be localhost 8000 / conversation / rename. We're going to pass in that body, and then in here we'll have our headers, and inside of headers we'll have our authorization. Let's go ahead and say authorization, it's going to be backticks bearer $, curly brace, and then this is going to go ahead and be payload.token. And then finally, we just need to go ahead and return our res.data. We have our data back. Let's scroll down to below our mute fulfilled here. So below our mute conversation, we'll go ahead and say builder add case. We're going to go ahead and say rename conversation dot fulfilled. And we're going to have our state and our action. And let's go and open this. So we need to do basically the same thing. Const updated conversation list is equal to state dot conversations dot filter. We need to go ahead and filter C, where C dot conversation ID not equal to the action dot payload dot conversation ID. We need to go ahead and get rid of that old one. And then we're going to go ahead and return dot state. And then we're going to say conversation is going to be action dot payload with that updated conversation name. We go ahead and say conversations is going to be action dot payload and then dot updated and then conversation list, like so. That looks good. Awesome. So that's going to go ahead and do all the logic to actually make the request and update our state. Now we need to go ahead and do the majority of the work, which is going to go ahead and be doing all of the actual top bar, body, and all of that stuff of the conversation modal. So let's go ahead and hop back into the conversation modal and get to work on that. So inside of our conversation rename modal or message rename conversation modal, let's go ahead and bring in some states. We're going to say const conversation, and let's actually do this. Conversation is equal to use selector. We're going to have state and root state. And then this one's going to be a state dot message. This episode may be a little bit longer, but you win some, you lose some. And if we don't have a conversation somehow, this should never happen, but we'll return null just in case. So again, this should never happen because you can only get here by clicking on the icon inside the info, and the info has stuff loaded. So I'm not that worried about it, but it is what it is. Now I was lazy this time around. I'm putting everything just inside this file instead of like having 5 different files for one modal. So we're gonna say message rename conversation modal top bar here. Whoops, top bar, like so. Set up this. So in here, we're going to say const dispatch is an app dispatch, like so, equal to use dispatch. Let's go and set this up. And we're going to say const and close color. Whoops, close color and set close color is equal to use state. And let's go ahead and say this is a string. And then to start out, this is going to be pound 657786. There we go. And then we're going to say const handle close modal is equal to an e react.mouse event. And this will go ahead and be on an HTML div element. And I should have probably made the skeleton code first, but it is what it is. E.stop propagation. And we're going to go ahead and dispatch. And this is going to go ahead and be our update display rename conversation. Now we can go ahead and return our div, our div class name equal to message rename, rename conversation, bucket type dash modal dash top dash bar, like so. And here we're gonna have a div, and this div is gonna have some stuff going on in it. Class name is gonna equal to message dash rename conversation modal top bar dash close. And here we're gonna have on mouse enter. This is going to go ahead and call the set close color, and it's going to go ahead and set the close color to #000, and then on mouse leave is going to go ahead and be a function, and on this function we're going to go and set close color to the one that we had before. Let's make sure it's a string #657786, our darkish gray color, and then we're going to have an on click, which is going to go ahead and call the handle close modal. And then we're going to go ahead and close this div. Inside this, we're going to have a close icon from Material UI. So let's go ahead and bring that in. SX is going to be equal to width of 16 px of a height of 16 px. And then our color is going to go ahead and be our close color. So we can go ahead and change that. I'm sure there's probably some way to hover on these, but it is what it is. We have an h3 class name equal to message dash rename dash conversation modal top bar title. And then here, this is just going to go ahead and say rename conversation. Now, I did have all this like in one, but I'm going to go ahead and do the CSS, make sure it looks okay, and then continue. Let's go ahead and do one of these like so. Now let's go ahead and hop into the CSS real quick and style this up. There's only like 3 classes here. Let's go ahead and start out with the message-rename conversation modal top bar. And I think I'm missing some CSS maybe, not sure. Padding on this guy is going to be 24px, 24px. We're going to have 16px and then 24px. We're going to go ahead and say position on this is relative. Next, we're going to say .message -rename conversation modal -top -bar. And then this one's going to be close. Inside of our close, we're going to display flex. We're going to go ahead and justify content. Content in the center. If I could type, that'd be cool. We're going to go ahead and align items in the center. We're going to go say position is absolute, and then we'll have a top 16px. We're going to have a right of 16 px, maybe px, there we go. And we're going to have a cursor pointer. And then finally we have the title .message -rename rename. I could type conversation modal top bar title, and then in here we're going to go ahead and say margin is 0, our padding is 0, we're going to have a font dash size 23px, then we're going to have a font dash weight of 600. So that's everything for the top bar. Let's save and make sure this is looking okay. Now let's just give it a refresh for giggles. We go ahead and click on rename. Now you can see rename conversation. We can hover over this. That looks good. Awesome. So now let's go ahead and continue working on the actual body itself. And yeah, I'm definitely missing some CSS. I'm not sure where the CSS went. I'll have to go looking. It either didn't get committed or something strange is going on here. Back inside our modal, let's go and start working on the content for the body. Let's go and say const and message rename conversation and modal body. It's going to be a react.fc, and then this is going to take in some props. It's going to take in the conversation, and then let's go ahead and say equal to, break apart our conversation, there we go, make our arrow function, and then we'll go ahead and return, and let's just return a div, the class name, equal to message-rename conversation. I could type conversation -modal -body. From up here, let's set up our state and actions. We need our const token is equal to use selector. Go and bring in this state :root state. And this is going to go ahead and be state.user. Next, we need our const dispatch. We could have passed this down, but it is what it is. Equal to use dispatch. It's not that hard to go and just grab it again. Const and then updated name. And then we're going to go ahead and say set updated name, bucket type, equal to use state. And this will be a string. And then this is going to go ahead and be an arrow function like so. And here we're going to go ahead and actually not do this. We're going to say conversation name question mark. If that's the case, we'll say conversation. I don't know why conversation name isn't showing up. Otherwise, we'll do an empty string. What's going on with this conversation? React.fc. We didn't import the conversation, I guess. Now it seems like we're fine. Let's go ahead and say const update name is equal to react.change event. And this is going to be on HTML input element like so. Do our arrow function, and then here we're going to say set updated name to e.target.value. So go ahead and update the new name, and then we also going to go ahead and say const submit rename conversation, and here this is going to equal to an arrow function takes in an e react.mouse event on an HTML. This is going to be a button element. Let's go ahead and make this, and here we're going to say e.stopPropagation. We're going to go ahead and check to make sure we have our token. And if we have our token, we're going to go ahead and dispatch a rename conversation from our slice. And inside of this rename conversation, we're going to go ahead and say conversation ID is going to go ahead and be conversation.conversation ID. We're going to go ahead and have our conversation, name, which is going to be the updated name, which will either be an empty string or the name that we put in. We'll have our token. And then if this is successful or no matter what, we're going to go ahead and dispatch. We're going to go ahead and dispatch, update display rename conversation. We're going to go ahead and close out of this modal. And then we need one more. It's going to be const remove conversation name is equal to e react.mouse event. And this is going to also be on HTML button element like so. Go ahead and do one of these. e.stop propagation again. And then we probably need to go ahead and check for the token again. I didn't. We're going to say if token here. We're going to go ahead and dispatch once again, and we're going to dispatch that rename conversation. And inside of rename conversation, we're going to go ahead and say conversation ID once again is conversation.conversation ID. But this time the conversation name is just going to be an empty string. Just going to reset it, pass in our token, and then we'll do the same thing again. I know we have some reused code here. It is what it is. Update rename conversation. That's fine. We could have like passed some flag or something silly, but this is way easier. So there we go. So there's our logic and state. Now we can go ahead and start working on setting this up. I need to find where the lost CSS went. I don't know where all the CSS went. Kind of scary, but we'll go ahead and say div class name equal to, and this will be our message dash rename conversation modal dash body, and then dash disclaimer. Like so, disclaimer, that's better. And then inside the disclaimer, we're going ahead and have an info outlined from interior UI sx equal to height. We'll go ahead and set to 20 px. And we'll go ahead and set the width to 20 px. And then finally, we'll say the color is going to be £657786. Go ahead and do that. Let's make sure it imports properly. It looks good. Perfect. Key class name is going to equal to, and message rename conversation modal body, and then this one is going to be disclaimer dash text. Hopefully I spelled that right. And then here nicknames are end to end encrypted. They aren't on my side, but it is what it is. And visible only to you. Technically it's visible to everyone because I'm just renaming the conversation. I'm just copying what was in here. Let's come outside this div. We're going to have an h4 class name equal to, and this is going to be message rename conversation dash modal body, whoopsie daisies, body label. Inside the label it's going to say nick name, and then we're going to have a validated and then text input. So now we're going to say valid is equal to true. We're going to go ahead and say name is equal to nickname. We're going to say label is equal to nickname. We're going to have a type equal to text. We'll have a change value equal to our update name, and then finally we'll have a data equal to updated name, like so. Go ahead and close out of that guy. We'll have a div, the class name equal to message rename conversation modal body, and then this one is going to be a button group, like so. Inside our button group, we're going to have a button. Wow, who'd have thought? With a class name equal to, and this can be fun. So this is going to get messy. We're going to have a message dash rename conversation dash modal body dash remove dash button, and then also below this we're going to go ahead and say $ curly brace conversation dot conversation name question mark, and if we have a conversation name, we're going to go ahead and say message dash rename conversation modal dash body dash remove button enabled, like so. And then otherwise we're going to have our message dash rename dash conversation conversation modal body remove button disabled. Okay, so now let's come outside the class name. It's a little bit messy. Disabled is going to go ahead and be equal to not conversation, conversation.conversation name. And then our on click is going to go ahead and equal to remove conversation name. And then we can go ahead and open this body, and this is going to go ahead and say remove. And then we need another button. So button, and this one, the class name is slightly nicer. Class name is going to be equal to, and this one is just message rename conversation modal dash body dash save button. And then below we're going to say on click is equal to submit rename conversation. Open this button up, and it's going to say save. So that is the entire thing. Let's see. I messed up update name. Okay, update name. That's better. There we go. And then obviously now we want to come up here and use this. So now we have our message rename conversation modal body. We need to pass in the conversation, I believe. It's going to be equal to conversation, and I typoed something. Message rename conversation modal body. Dude, I typoed here. Copy this, bring it back up here and paste it in. Paste this guy in. That's better. Okay, so now I need to go down and track down all of the missing CSS, because the only CSS I have for this is the modal body itself. So this class, I don't have disclaimer, disclaimer text, label, any of these. Let me track that down real quick, and we'll go ahead and get the CSS done. It's gonna be a little bit of a longer episode, but I like that we grouped all of the rename message stuff together here. Okay, so that's scary. We're missing like all of the CSS. I think I just ran into a front-end dev's worst nightmare. I had all of the CSS written out. Now it's just vanished. Apparently it didn't get saved. Let me go through my git commits and see if I can't find it. All right, y'all, this is not good. The CSS is just gone. So what we're gonna go ahead and have to do is I'm going to redo all of the code for the CSS. I don't know what happened to the CSS. This was working on my old branch. I know you guys have heard this story before, but yeah, I don't know what happened to the CSS. We don't have time to go through, I don't think, and recreate it. I mean, I could possibly recreate it real quick, but it's gonna make the episode really long. But let's go ahead and get what I have, and then maybe I'll see what I want to do here. So let's hop into the CSS. We'll go ahead and say dot message rename conversation modal, and then body. Inside the body we have a padding of 0, 24px, 24px, and then 24px, like so. So now this is what we're looking at. So I don't know what in the heck happened to our CSS. I might be able to yoink Twitter over and just do this live really quick. Let me go ahead and open up a conversation real quick. And of course it changed. Why wouldn't it change? Now it's completely different than what it was before. So I love to see that. Okay, so for this guy, let's go ahead and throw a display flex and then like a font size of 13 and stuff like that on here. Let's go ahead and grab our disclaimer here. Let's copy this, hop back into the CSS. So for this guy, let's go ahead and say width is 100%. Let's go and say display of flex, and we'll justify content in the flex start. We'll align items in the center, and we'll put a gap of maybe 16 EX to start, and then that should start making it look a little bit better. And you can see that these kind of go side by side, and maybe instead of center we want it to go up here. But let's see what it looks like after we change this to like have no margin and padding and make it 13. So let's go ahead and do that. So here we're going to go ahead and say margin of 0, a padding of 0, and then let's go ahead and say that the font dash size is 13px. We're going to go ahead and say the font dash weight is 400. We're going to say the color is going to be £657786. Let's just see how that looks, and then if we need to, we'll also go ahead and align items flex start. That way it doesn't look a little bit odd. It looks better, and maybe we will just go ahead and keep that as is. I think that looks okay, I guess. It might look a little bit better if we go ahead and put this as flex start as well. Flex start. So I do think that looks a little bit better. Now let's go ahead and deal with the nickname. So here our nickname is going to be about, says also 13 pixels, so it's just a little bit thicker. So let's hop in and do the nickname. So now for our label, we're going to say margin is, let's go ahead and say 0, and then maybe we do want some padding on the top and bottom. So padding we'll do like maybe 16px 0, then we'll go ahead and do like 8px 0. I believe that should do it. And then font dash size is going to be 13px as well. Font dash weight is like 500 maybe, and then color, once again, do pound 657786. Go ahead and delete this and save that, and let's just see what it looks like. I think that looks pretty good. Now we need to go ahead and deal with the button group, so let's go ahead and do that. I don't remember what this even looked like anymore because it's gone now, so that's great. I think that spacing looks okay. So let's go ahead and hop back in here. Go ahead and deal with this, paste it in. So here we're just going to say width 100%. Let's go ahead and say that the padding on the top is maybe like 16px or something. We'll go ahead and just display flex this. We'll justify content space between, and we'll align items in the center like so. All right, looks good. Now what we want to go ahead and do is set up the buttons, I suppose. And again, I don't remember what the buttons looked like because they got rid of them. I don't know why. So let's go ahead and hop back in and grab the first button. So we're going to go ahead and say dot this. Okay, so width, we're just going to go ahead and say fit dash content, and maybe we add some padding on it. So padding, padding, if I could type. Let me see what this button kind of looks like with padding wise. So this button just has like 8 and then nothing. So padding, so top and bottom, let's do 0 and then 8px. And then the height of the button is going to be about, assuming that's 32. So height will be 32px. And then we're going to go ahead and say border is none. Border radius is going to go ahead and be 16px. And then we won't have a color because we'll have disabled, although color is going to go ahead and be white, I guess. And then we need to go ahead and do the enabled and disabled. Let's go ahead and copy this and paste it in. And then enabled, we're going to go ahead and say background color is red. And then we can also go ahead and say cursor is pointer, and we can probably go ahead and copy this and paste it in. We can go ahead and say hover, and we can go ahead and update the background dash color RGBA, so red 255 0 0, and then maybe like 0.9 or something, just to change a little bit, make sure background color is proper. Let's go ahead and do disabled. So disabled, we'll go ahead and say background color, and just make sure we say disabled. Hopefully I did that right. The background color will be RGBA, and then 255 0 0.75 maybe. We'll get rid of this cursor pointer. We don't want it to do anything. We'll go ahead and delete this. There we go. Now we have another button to deal with. Now let's go ahead and do the save button. And we also make sure we spell that properly. Save button, copy this, go into the CSS, go ahead and deal with the save button. Save button is going to be basically the same. Also, we might want to set the font size inside this guy, like 15 maybe. So wherever we have our remove button, also add a font size of 15px and a font weight of like 600. And I'm basically just going to copy the same thing. I don't really care. We could have just used the same button probably, but we're going to do here, paste that in, color white, that's fine. But then our background dash color is going to go ahead and be our Twitter blue color 1D A1 F2, and then we probably want a hover on this. Let's go and copy this again. We're going to go ahead and have to find that color. I don't remember where this color came from, so let me go ahead and convert this color really quick. So here we're going to have a cursor, a pointer, and then a background dash color RGBA, and here we're going to say 29 comma 161 comma 242. 242 comma 0 point, I don't know, we'll do like 9. So now let's just see how horrible this looks. This is just like off the cuff. All right, that doesn't look horrible. Remove is not working. Let's see what's going on with that. 0.5, because it should be disabled right now. There we go, looks better. We might go ahead and make it so that they justify on the start end or flex end. Let's go ahead and go to our button group. Let's go ahead and say flex end and see what that looks like, and then maybe have a gap of like 8px. Let's also make sure we spell center right. Okay, I think that looks a little bit better. So now we can close out of it. We can go rename. We can go ahead and say Rick and Mort maybe. Save, it closes out. Now it says Rick and Mort. So that took a lot longer than expected. I don't know what gobbled up the CSS. I had all of the CSS already like planned out and working. So I don't know what's going on with that. Let's see if we can go ahead and remove. So now remove is completely broken. Let's see what's going on with this real quick. So let's see, this should not be disabled. This should be enabled. So it is enabled. So what's going on with that? Let's see what's going on with the background color of enabled. Enabled background color is red. Let's see if we spelled something wrong. MessageRenameConversationModal body remove button enabled. Let's see if we spelled something wrong in here. I'm guessing I probably spelled something wrong in here. Copy this and check it out. And let's go ahead and paste this in. I think it changed slightly, but I can't tell. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. Paste it in. It looks like it's the same actually. There we go, looks better. Looks a lot better. Remove it. Now it goes back to Rick and Mort Dog. Terrific. All right, y'all, I know this was a longer episode because we ended up having to go through and fix CSS that was missing. But if you did get to this point and did enjoy, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Everything helps out here with the YouTube algorithm. If you do want to see where we started from absolute scratch to get to point now, there's a playlist in the description down below. And once again, if you guys do want access to the private repository for this project, you need to go ahead and subscribe to the repository to your membership here on the channel, and that'll go ahead and unlock you a form that will allow you to request access to this repository and any other private repository you may have at the time. With that being said, y'all, hope you have a great day. This has been Ethan or Coder. I'll see you all in the next video.